Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome again to another episode of Coffee and Oatmeal with yours truly, Mr. Nobody. Just wanted to make this one is a quick follow-up to the last video regarding abortion and use of force. Had an interesting discussion or two after that video. Wanted to make a few clarifications and give some final thoughts on this discussion. So the first would be that I had a friend reach out and talk about in his comments the use of force. And he, probably rightfully so, assumed that I immediately meant going in and stopping an abortion in the process. And I do think that maybe there is some nuance, or if there was a really skilled law enforcement team involved, that something like that could be a possibility in certain scenarios. But largely what I had intended by force was the use of force to prevent them from even starting. I think the uniqueness of an abortion, and this is something that I've thought of since making that last video, is the fact that once it's started, or even sometimes before it's even started, the murder is effectively already taken place. Whereas if you see your neighbor getting attacked, there's a real opportunity to stop it and save their life. And again, generally always you have to stop or take the life of the other person in many cases, especially as a citizen who only has a sidearm or something to use to help the situation. With an abortion, the murder, there's almost always even preemptive measures taking place to basically start the death of the baby. So I think there's a perspective to be had there that, just like a drug deal going down, if you can stop the drug deal going down, we've seen that on TV a lot, then that is definitely the priority. The priority and primary use of force is to stop the whole thing from happening in the first place. Last resort, would you ever actually use force to actually intervene in one? Hopefully you're ending that situation before it even starts. And that could be from the shutdown, destruction of the clinics, places that these occur, the arrest of the individuals that are trying to, make them happen. Basically, I think first and foremost, you have to go full on law enforcement and legal against the situation before you would ever step in with full on use of force. So wanted to make that clarification because it definitely wasn't necessarily clear from what I said, and there is something to be considered there, which I'm probably not the expert or right person to really figure that out or talk about that right now. But leaving that open-ended, that it could possibly be the case, but I think abortion's a little different. And I do think therein lies the difference also of why we don't immediately run in and use force to stop it currently, but probably should, again, mostly in a preventative sense of use of force. And we'll get into, I think, why we haven't done that and basically why we should and what we need to do to get there. And so to jump right to that point would basically be, why aren't we doing this? Why haven't we ended up at this place even of, physically stopping the clinics? Why is it legal? Why is it being championed in our country? It's beyond an entitlement at this point. It's insane. It's literally celebration of abortion. There's some really evil videos out there of women, celebrating this. It's just abhorrent to God that that's happening. So why are we at this place? I have a couple different thoughts on the matter. One of them is that even in just war theory, when you use force and violence against people, it's done as a last resort. And so, have all peaceful options. Has every other option been tried? I've seen this guy on Instagram. I think his name, he goes by like Pew Pew Channel or something like that. I'll have to try and link it properly in the description of this video. But he came up with this kind of concept recently, or maybe he's just calling better attention to it, of violence being a virtue. So he says violence is a virtue. And that, I think, is highlighted in just war theory. You try to use any other means possible to stop something before you use violence. War is not fun. Death is not good. They're tragic and, terrible results of a broken world. And so if we can avoid them, we should. So have we expended all of our efforts to do things peacefully, first, and then we should go in and use violence if necessary. So I think the case in and of itself, the murder of the unborn, is absolutely a scenario that justifies the use of force and violence against it. The question is are we, in a place like I mentioned last time where we could have reasonable success at using so, and have we really expended all of our resources? And I think from that perspective, the answer is no, a little bit. And I think that is largely the result of a failure of what's called Christian duty. This is an area that I think God is really trying to work the church back into right now. Some of the church has been dutiful in this area. Abortion has been a hot button topic in our country for a long time. I think we're seeing the results that whatever has been attempted at this point is failing. It's been going on for many years. It's getting worse. It's getting more celebrated. And this is disgusting to God, and it should be disgusting to us as Christians. And so if what we're doing up to this point isn't working, I think we need to start taking more drastic measures probably, and be willing to give our lives to fight for this cause and the lives of those that are unborn. And so that, I think, is what we're seeing right now. I think a lot of people are starting to question this and see the realities, see the upheaval that's going on in our country, matters of justice, and of all areas. I mean, we're talking about the daily murder of thousands of people in this regard. So this is, of all things to make a priority, this is one of them. So standing up in Christian duty, learning to step forward in that, I think is an area of the growth for the church right now. And so we're all in this together. We've all failed in many ways, not spoken up in the way that we should on this, or done things, or maybe we have and it's just not been effective. It's time for the next thing. And so I think we kind of have to get our cards right in order to do this. And I think one reason that we should be incredibly motivated by this is the fact that when it comes to our Christian duty, God has the jurisdiction over our lives in regards to us doing this or failing in this regard. A friend and I have been debating some stuff recently and had learned, God really showed up even yesterday and just provided some material that clarified a ton of stuff for us. And some of that debate has been over the difference between like the Mosaic and civil law in the Old Testament, and how we have, laws that are based on God's moral law that we seek to follow and we use for our justice system. But that when it comes to like the commands of Jesus, being a good Samaritan and, not repaying evil for evil and things of that nature, we don't have laws against that, right? It seems that there's only laws on some of the things in the, in the Bible, and not as much as what are called the positive aspects of God's law. And that is actually correct from what we can understand right now from this reading, is that the jurisdiction of things of God's law, like his moral law, the Mosaic law, civil law, and the negative aspect of the law is from the state and the church, right? In the church, we don't get punished. There's no church discipline if we haven't spoken up on abortion enough. Like, how do you even measure somebody's heart and know if they're, if they got the right heart towards the matter or not? You can't. That's for God. It's his jurisdiction. God knows our hearts. Humans do not. And so things of the heart, things of that nature are within our covenantal duty to God. And so he is our judge. He is the one who has jurisdiction over our lives. And so we Christians, anywhere in our life where we are not standing up in proper duty and, doing the things that God asks us to do, even if we don't get punished by the state or the church for it, there is a curse from God. Deuteronomy 28, definitely a chapter you should go read, where God goes over the blessings and the curses that come on his people for either being obedient to him or disobedient to him. And that is where we see all these kind of what seem like gray areas of the law covered. If we're not being dutiful, then God is the one who's going to bring a curse on us. And that should be way more fearful to us in a reverent sense than dealing with the state or with church leadership. And not that we should ever look down on church leadership for trying what they're doing, but sometimes they fail and sometimes they do the wrong thing too. And so fearing in that sense, someone's judgment from a leadership perspective, while there may be error and humans are prone to sin in that regard, God is perfect and God is the one holding us accountable to do these things of our duty. So I do think that the answer to our question is that ultimately, yes, force is justified in this case. We have to use proper force, use force at the right time. I do think largely we should look at like Augustine's just war theory and make sure that we're lined up with that before any of that would be used. And I do think there's a couple areas right now, like I mentioned in the last video, where we would not fit into that theory. One of them being the probability of success. The Christian community is incredibly fractured right now in our country, fractured geographically, from a faith perspective, not unified in a lot of things. We can't even talk about politics from a church pulpit right now, even though we're called to be unified in all things. So there's a lot of issues with the church. So I don't think that we have a probability of success. We don't have locally organized militias, which is our constitutional right to do. And you would need something like that in order to really force a hand on your local authorities to say, look, you close down the clinics or we're moving in, we're taking them down. In order to actually be a force to be reckoned with, we would have to be organized, have a chance of success, and the whole 9 yards. So that's going to take some work. We should strive for that. I think we should be striving towards that, should be ready to have to do that no matter what, because whether it's abortion or another issue, say a mob comes to your town and starts burning down your neighbor's property, you also have the duty to stop that. In any of these cities, if you're living in them, it's our duty to push back and fight for our neighbors and their lives and the things that they have been given, their liberty, God's perfect law of liberty, James 1:25. We fight for that as Christians. We stand for that in duty. So we need to be prepared for that. But right now, we're not there. I don't see that happening. Another one of the just right or just war theories that I think we have to consider is the have you expended all opportunities to do it peacefully? We may be close. We may be getting there. I think that there would have to be kind of a last firm-handed push from the church in a couple ways. Like I said, talking to governors, talking to this authorities, really going at this from a legislative and a social perspective hard, and letting them know that what's coming after this is war, full-on war. Our country, by the grace of God and to the glory of God, fought to end slavery. Millions of Americans died on our home turf to end that evil, which people right now are just backwards on. It's insane. It's amazing what people are saying in this country right now and how far from history and truth and actual justice we are. But either way, our country fought that war. People voluntarily gave their lives to end slavery, which, as terrible and horrible as kidnapped, human trafficked slavery is, and there was death in those circumstances. Compared to what abortion is right now, even that is below abortion in terms of the thousands of lives daily that are being taken because of abortion. So in terms of a priority and an area to where we should be considering a actual civil war if we had to, it should be over something like abortion, not over any of the garbage that we're seeing right now go on in our country and the striving away from liberty and the true systems of justice that have classically reigned in our country. So food for thought. We have a long way to go on this, lots more to think about and work on and organization to do. I think some of that's going to be happening anyway because of COVID-19. We're already seeing community shifts. People are moving out of these big cities. Good for them. People are contemplating moving out of states where they've grown up, and the government is just ridiculously tyrannical. Some people, if they want to stay and fight and organize internally, do it. That could be encouraged too. But right now, point being, we're seeing community shift, and I think this is just the start. There's a long road coming, especially when we start to look into some of the financial aspects of things and that asset bubble that I've been talking about. Once that thing really pops and everything blows up, we are going to see some major changes, I believe. I don't know that this is fully in the cards. Like the Bible says, I don't know what God's bringing tomorrow. I don't want to act like I can predict it all, but I think looking in wisdom, we can try to be a little smart and strategic about what is, we can be prepared and attempt to be ready for these things, especially when, again, there are obvious things such as a Christian failure of duty in certain areas or clearly immoral practices such as the way that our government is handling our currency currently. So, this is an opportunity. This may be years in the making for Christians to be getting ready for this, to be launching this assault from, again, social and legislative perspective first, and then if necessary, actual full-out declared war. And man, I think that would be pleasing to God for us to be ready to stand and give our lives to see the original right to life that our Creator gave us and is guaranteed by our Constitution, supposed to be from a federal perspective, upheld and guaranteed to all the unborn in this country. Once you have, had sex with another partner, a male and female, and they've created a baby, that baby is a new creation. Just like when you mix bread, you mix the ingredients together, you put it in the oven. Once those ingredients are together, it is a new creation. You are baking a loaf of bread. You do not go back and separate the elements of the ingredients. It is a new creation. And so we should be protecting that. God's moral law is very clear on this. It's an area, this murder of the unborn is an area that is abhorrent to God, and there's a lot of passivity around it right now. So hopefully we can all be encouraged to start standing up, fighting in the right direction on this, encouraging one another, knowing we've all failed, that the gospel forgives us for having failed in these areas. This is why we all need Jesus. None of us are perfect. So let's not be self-righteous about it. Let's be dutiful about it and do it for the glory of God and the love of our neighbor, just as Christ would have us do. Two greatest commandments, right? So that's all for now. I'm sure we'll touch back on some of these topics again in the future. Please like, comment, share, check out coffeeandoatmeal.com. Get in touch with me. Would love to hear from you, hear more thoughts, and let's just keep talking and chatting and having some coffee and oatmeal together. So take it easy. I'm Mr. Nobody.